The beeping of the machines echoed in my ears, their rhythmic pulse strangely soothing in the chaos around me. I was fighting for my life, my body lying helpless on the operating table, fragile and vulnerable. The last thing I remembered, before the anesthesia took over, was his physiognomy standing beside me, his hands trembling as they held mine. He had promised to be there for me, no matter what, but something changed that night, something I never saw coming. When I woke up, groggy and disoriented, the stark hospital lights made everything seem distant and surreal. It took a few moments to realize I was alive. My heart surged with relief, but as I scanned the room, I noticed something was missing. "Where is James?" I asked the nurse, my voice barely more than a whisper. Her kind eyes flickered with hesitation before she answered. "He left a while ago, dear. He's down the hall with someone." A knot tightened in my stomach. I didn't understand. I was fighting for my life, barely pulling through surgery, and he wasn't here. I managed to pull myself up slightly, wincing from the pain that surged through my body, and asked for my phone. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, expecting to hear his voice, his reassurance, but it went straight to voicemail. With a sinking heart, I mustered the strength to ask the nurse to take me to where he was. She gave me a sympathetic glance but agreed. As the wheelchair rolled down the sterile, bright hallway, my mind raced. What could be more important than me right now? And then I saw him sitting in the waiting room, his arms wrapped around her. It was Emma, his ex-girlfriend. She was sobbing, leaning into his chest as if the world had crumbled around her, and he held her close as though she was the one who almost died. My heart shattered. They didn't see me at first, but when they did, James looked up, his face a mix of guilt and confusion. He stood quickly, pulling away from Emma, but the damage was done. He had chosen her, in my darkest moment, when I needed him the most. "Sarah," he started, but I couldn't hear the rest. The pain was too much. I turned and wheeled myself away, tears streaming down my face. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had felt on that operating table. It wasn't just that he had gone to her, it was that in my most vulnerable moment, when I was clinging to life, he wasn't there. I survived the surgery, but something inside me died that day. The part of me that believed in him, in us, dissolved under the harsh reality of what I had witnessed. He didn't run to me. He didn't hold me. Instead, he ran to her. In the days that followed, James tried to explain, to justify why he had been there for Emma. She had called him in the middle of my surgery, apparently heartbroken and in need, but his words didn't matter anymore. His actions spoke louder than anything he could say. Love is supposed to be about being there when it counts the most, but when my life hung in the balance, I learned that I wasn't his first priority, and that, more than anything, was what broke me. In the end, I walked away from him, just as he had walked away from me when I needed him the most. The scars from surgery would heal with time, but the ones he left on my heart would stay forever. The days after my surgery were a blur of doctors, nurses, and recovery plans, but no amount of medical care could fix the gaping wound James had left in my heart. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, his arms wrapped around Emma instead of being there for me. I had always thought that love was about standing by each other through the worst of times, in sickness and in health, they said, but the reality hit me like a freight train. Love wasn't always as strong as we thought. Sometimes, it was fragile, easily broken by a single choice, a moment of weakness. I tried to focus on my recovery, but every little thing reminded me of James. The empty chair beside my hospital bed, where he should have been, the messages from friends asking how I was, but none from him. My mind was a battlefield, torn between wanting to understand why he did what he did and the deep hurt that came from knowing he chose someone else. On my third day in the hospital, my mum sat her day beside me, holding my hand as I stared out the window. The silence was comforting, but even she could see I wasn't really healing, not in the way that mattered. "Sarah," she said gently, "I don't know what's going on in your heart, but I do know you deserve better, someone who will be there when it counts." Her words lingered, piercing through the fog of confusion. I knew she was right, but it was so hard to let go of someone I had loved for so long. James wasn't a bad person, I kept telling myself. He made a mistake, a horrible one, but that didn't make him evil. Yet, every time I thought about that night, my chest tightened, and the betrayal felt fresh all over again. A week passed, and I was finally discharged. I was physically better, but emotionally, I was still a wreck. James had called a few times, left messages I couldn't bring myself to listen to. I wasn't ready to face him. Not yet, maybe not ever. But life has a way of forcing things to the surface when you least expect it. One afternoon, as I lay on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I knew it was him. The way the knock hesitated, unsure, told me all I needed to know. I debated for a moment, considering not answering, but then, with a deep breath, I pulled myself up and opened the door. There he stood, James. His face was pale, his eyes full of regret. For a split second, I wanted to throw my arms around him, to forget everything and let him back in, but then I remembered her. Remembered how he ran to Emma when I was fighting for my life. "Sarah," he started, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry." I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. "Why, James? Why her, of all times, when I needed you the most?" He looked down, ashamed. "She called me, crying, and, I don't know, I panicked. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I didn't think. I thought you were going to be okay, and I cut him off, my voice rising. "You thought I was going to be okay? I almost died, James, and you ran to your ex-girlfriend. How does that even make sense?" He winced at my words. I know, I messed up, but I swear, I didn't mean to hurt you. I wasn't thinking straight." I shook my head, tears forming in my eyes. "The truth is, James, it's not just about what you did, it's about what you didn't do. You weren't there for me when everything was falling apart. You weren't the one holding me together, and that's what hurts the most." He stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "Please, Sarah, let me make it right. I love you." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the pain. I believed he loved me, but love wasn't enough anymore. Not after what had happened. The trust had been shattered, and no amount of apologies could piece it back together. "I loved you, James," I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. "But I need someone who will choose me, always, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw the depth of his regret, but it didn't change the fact that he had failed me when it mattered most. "I'm sorry," I said softly, "but I can't do this anymore." He didn't argue, didn't try to fight me on it. He just nodded, his face a mask of sorrow, and turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, a weight lifted off my chest. It wasn't the end I had wanted, but it was the end I needed. In the days that followed, I started to help both physically and emotionally. It wasn't easy, and there were moments where I missed him, moments where I questioned if I had made the right choice, but deep down, I knew I had. Love is more than just words. It's about showing up, being there when it counts, and proving that you're willing to fight for the person you care about. And in my darkest hour, James had shown me that I wasn't his priority. Now, it was time to make myself a priority, to pick up the pieces of my broken heart and start over. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, life moved forward. There were moments of doubt, of course, in those quiet nights when the loneliness crept in, and I wondered if I had made the right decision. But each time those thoughts surfaced, I reminded myself of that night in the hospital. I reminded myself of how it felt to be alone when I needed someone the most. I knew, deep down, that leaving James was the only choice that could bring me peace. It wasn't easy, though. The healing process was painful, not just from the surgery, but from the emotional wounds that lingered. I spent a lot of time with myself, rediscovering the person I had lost along the way. I had spent so much time worrying about us, about him, that I have forgotten about my dreams, my goals, my happiness. I decided to throw myself into my recovery, both physically and emotionally. Every day, I pushed myself a little harder in physical therapy, determined to regain my strength. But it wasn't just about healing my body. I knew I needed to rebuild my confidence, my sense of self-worth. So, I started doing things from small steps at first. I took long walks in the park, joined a yoga class, and even started painting again, something I had long since abandoned. In those quiet moments, with a paintbrush in hand, I found solace. I realized that the person I had been before James for the heartbreak was still inside me. She was just waiting to be rediscovered. My friends, the ones who had been there for me through everything, became my lifeline. They helped me see that my worth wasn't tied to someone else's love. They reminded me that I was strong, capable, and deserving of someone who would stand by me no matter what. With their support, I started to see myself in a new light, one that wasn't dimmed by the pain of the past. And then, something unexpected happened. Eddie stopped missing him. The ache that had lived in my chest since the surgery began to fade. It wasn't that I had forgotten about James or the love we once shared. It was more that I had outgrown it. I had outgrown him. I wasn't angry anymore, either. I had spent so much time being hurt by his choices, by his betrayal, that I forgot how to let go. But as time passed, I realized that holding on to the pain only hurt me more. So, I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. Forgiveness didn't mean we could be together again, but it meant that I was free from the weight of what had happened.